In this demonstration, we're going to be using a lot more creative processes or intuitive processes in order to, develop a good figure drawing, but with mixed media. So we are going to be using our sketchbook drawings of our figures that we have done already, but we're going to now transfer those ideas onto your larger 18 by 24. So I really want you all to explore a variety of mediums that you should have. So you see how I've laid them all out, all that I need. And I want you to do the same thing, because when you do have an idea, and something does just spark in the mind when you're into drawing, and when you're kind of at a moment, something arises, you want to be able just to immediately record that and apply it to the paper. So go ahead and get everything out like I have. So what I have here is my markers, all my colors ready to go. I have my Vine charcoal. I have my compressed charcoal already out, ready to go. I have my pens that you're supposed to have as well, which are Micron pens. They come in different sizes. Just grab the ones that you have. So pen and ink are good ways for us to kind of really make some dominant lines that separate from a lot of the rest of the type of lines that we've been working with charcoal. So we can really get tight and get some detail now. But go ahead and get your drawing pens, your microns out. I also have just a Sharpie and some erasers ready to go next to me. I have my watercolors out, so go ahead and get those out as well. As many of the colors that you can or that you have, but if you have just what's on the color wheel, that would do fine. Yellow, blue, green, red, you can do a lot with those colors, so minimum amounts, but I think color could be useful here in both varieties of the line and also the brush and the wash. So I have those out and ready to go. I have my Sumi ink already poured out, and I have some water ready for one for cleaning and one for washing, and I have some brushes out as well for my watercolor and my washes, or my watercolor or my Sumi ink. So you see I have about my 1-inch brush. I have my 3/4 or my 1/2-inch brush, and I also have another kind of what's called a round brush, watercolor brush, and I have a Sumi brush. So whatever brush that you have. Remember, watercolor brushes are different than oil painting brushes or acrylic painting brushes, so just make sure they're just fine, softer haired. And really just have everything ready to go, because I think now at this point we're ready to move on just to some natural free form mixed media type drawings. And here's where a lot of the fun can really happen, because now that you have no rules or no boundaries on medium, then you can really let your imagination and your intuition flow. So what we want to do next is make sure that we are working with a landscape format. So turn your sheet, or make sure you're working horizontal. Since we have 3 figures that we should be working with, we want plenty of space. So typical figurative framing, if you look at cinema, and if you look at large scale painting from the Renaissance or whatever, a lot of it is wide format or wide scale format or horizontal format. So we'll be working with that today. But the first thing I want you to do as well is to get a regular sheet of paper, maybe just a sheet from your sketchbook, or instead of wasting a sheet from your sketchbook, you might want to just use a regular piece of typing paper. And I want you to just fold it in half directly. Okay, and I also want you to get a pair of scissors, and I just want you to make maybe a nip at about what is that? It's about 2 inches or so, and make another one about 2 inches, and then let's go ahead and fold that, and then we'll go ahead and cut that center out. So you see what I'm doing here? I just folded it and just simply going to cut a window, right, just like that. Just a nice kind of window that we can kind of crop out some of the areas of the drawings, so we can kind of just pay attention to some areas. And that's also a good way for me to kind of show you how do we use, or how I would use sketches like this in order to recreate a larger drawing. Or another way to put it is to use our sketches as references in order for us to create something bigger that artists have been doing forever. That's why we have a sketchbook. We record thoughts, we record still life around our environment, and then we, use those ideas and record those ideas and use those ideas later on to some larger pieces of work. So getting to know your sketchbook and working with your sketchbook is pretty important into how artists work or how designers work in the larger fields of industry and creative industry and functional industry or functional designs. A lot of it has to do with what you sketch, how you record those ideas. So what we're going to be doing is basically using our frame to just kind of work around your figures. So I've zoomed in, and you can see how we can get our frame and kind of begin to work with paying attention to the negative space. And how do we separate some of these forms that we've drawn? How do we separate that from the larger idea of the sketch? You can do this with abstract drawings. You can do this with figurative drawings like we're doing. So it's just a great way to kind of visualize a lot of different ways that we can scale up certain parts of sketches. So imagine if this frame here was 3 by 4 or larger scale. We can see how that would imagine how that would look at a larger scale. And I really want you to do this. I want you to try your best to frame and find some interesting compositions just within the cropping like we're doing of your drawing of your sketchbook. So there could be some very interesting things that could happen. So in other words, if you're stuck, like if you don't know how to begin, a lot of times practices like this can help you spark ideas. Like I'm looking at this right there, right? Let me try to zoom in here. This area here where I can create some pretty dramatic effects or just compositions within that framing of that part of the drawing. And something like that composition there with this implied stare into this negative space here, right? That creates a pretty interesting composition, but also creates interesting content in compared to this. Very different feel, very different type of a balance that we have here versus her looking into negative space. She's looking off into the frame, or the figure's looking off into the frame. So a lot of ideas can really grow out of small little practices like this. So you can definitely see the difference, right, between those two. So you can see how I've taped up a certain frame that I enjoy on figure number 1 with my small frame square. Okay, so I want you to do that. I want you to get some tape and just try to find a frame that you like. And then we'll move on to the second figure where we'll do a different set of frames here. So what I want you to do is, again, grab a sheet of typing paper. Once again, fold it in half, just like we did last. This time we're going to cut it a little larger. So you see how small the other one is. This one we're going to go about 1 inch from each. Okay, we're going to snip it 1 inch from each end, and then about 2 inches across to get just a different frame. Okay, so I'm going to do that about 1 inch. Doesn't matter if it's a little under or a little over, as long as all 3 of your frames, because we'll be making 3 of them, as long as all 3 are different sizes, and at least 2 of them are pretty big. Okay, we want to do kind of a option, and do your best. Okay, but the more accurate, the better. Okay, so here we are. I have my second frame here, and you can see how it's a different, wider angle now that I can now use to break up or frame up my second figure. And of course, you choose which figure you want to focus in. So this is more of a inner focus. Imagine that camera or that crop being focused in, right? This one, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to move around and see where my cropping is, and I'll zoom in. How there's some interesting things happening with a lot of the negative space. This figure here has a lot of negative space already, kind of like that. I mean, because I have a portrait already up here with this one. This one might be good if I have, you know, some interesting negative space there. And as I move across, again, that leg is nice. So, you know, you'll have to make some decisions here. Now, and sometimes doing techniques like this can really, you know, help you find certain things that you might have missed when you were doing the initial sketch, you know, because, you know, you're in a different environment, you might be outside, it might be a different time of year or whatever it is, but sometimes you'll find something like right there. And I kind of like that right there. I like the way that that line is separating the two parts diagonally of that frame. That's interesting. I might use that. Okay. So I'm going to stick right there because I kind of like what's happening right there. Okay. So I want you to grab some tape and just, you know, make sure you mark it somehow in that area. And you can do this in a lot of different ways. You can take a cell phone and just take a pic of it and maybe use that pic, you know, have that on your computer or something that you can see that JPEG. So, you know, I'm doing it this way with cutout paper because I really like seeing the textures and the shadows. So you can see here how I have frame number 1, right, which is kind of more of a portrait frame, kind of traditional portraiture, but I do like this negative space. I like this strong line happening right there, and of course that back shoulder. You know, it just really makes, you know, certain intimacies of the drawing more prominent. It makes you really pay attention to, wow, you know, I really like how I did that gesture there. So it makes you appreciate your drawings in a different way. And then number 2 here, okay. I think I can do something with the diagonal line cut from corner to corner. There's something interesting I can do that, and maybe some of that hand hanging out could be interesting. Now let's go on to now the next one. So for your third cropping, I want you to go ahead and grab your last sheet of paper, and let's go ahead and cut this one 1/2 inch from the edge and 3 inches across. And that'll be our last large crop for our third and final figure. And I think that, again, you'll be able to, you know, make some decisions based off of these 3 compositions. And by all means, if you need 4 compositions, we'll go ahead and do 4. You know, if you need 5, go ahead and do 5. You know, or whatever, you know, as many as you need. But at least 3, I think, or at least to crop the 3 would be what you want. So here's a larger crop here, the largest. If I'm making decisions already about how I'm going to design or begin to, you know, and I guess design is not the best word, but how do I begin to approach a larger piece with this information that I'm, you know, beginning to, you know, process. And that's what we're doing. You know, we're processing kind of an experience. We're processing some information. And remember, each one of those marks that you have done on the drawing here on your sketch, you know, that was a certain decision that you made. As split of a second as that decision was, it still was a decision, and definitely creates a different reaction now that we are cropping it, now that we are emphasizing certain parts. So think about it in those terms again, you know. So I'm kind of having to make some decisions here on what I want to do. I can even do this here and get a sense. But remember, let's think about negative space. We don't always just want to center things. Sometimes we want to break up some compositions Now I have my smaller portrait over here facing, right, kind of that similar direction. So I don't know if I want to, in a sense, copy that same direction, right? I want to kind of, you know, play around with some variety. So I'm going to go ahead and place this one here. Okay. Yeah, right about there. So I get some negative space over here, remember? Okay. I can just pretend that that is closed up a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and tape that right there. I think that right there is kind of a composition or a crop that I like. Again, we can always move things around. Let me kind of spin it. Again, I'm still trying to figure things out. Oh yeah. Let's go ahead and do that. There we go. Because I like some shoulder in here. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that's what I'll stick with. I have my negative space on the opposite side of the portrait piece. Okay, and again, I have this piece here facing the again, the similar side that the other portrait is facing. So, you know, I'm just making kind of decisions based off of this type of like I said, observing and dissecting of the figures. So what I have to do now, and what I want you to do now, is look at them. And let's start to analyze, separating them from the original sketch. Now they are solely these compositions here. Imagine if these compositions were, you know, 5 feet tall. And I want you to start to decide on how are we going to combine these compositions or these croppings of these figures. How would I begin to combine in one image this information that I've decided on? And again, these things can change. You know, by all means, you know, you can continue to again add frames. I did like other parts of the figures, so it's hard just to choose 3. So if that happens, we'll then do 4. But I'm going to work with this, and then we'll begin to again decide to copy or represent these compositions onto your larger sheet of paper. And we're going to start off with Vine Charcoal, which is just a natural, easy, and forgivable way to start, and then we'll move on to some more of your mixed media. So here we are now, ready to begin the larger scale drawings. And so I've decided to start off with this composition here, the portrait composition, since it is the composition that has the most foreground, meaning that the majority of the space is taken up by the figure, which means that, you know, we're really close up to it. So I can really use that as a foreground. Again, remember, the foreground is the objects that are closest to you in the composition. So let's go ahead and decide on which one would be your foreground. And if you want to just go ahead and use my formula, you can, meaning that I choose a portrait cropping or a portrait composition. Again, you can follow as much as my instructions as you can, or you can let it go and be more experimental with the processes. Anyway, it will work and something interesting will happen. So I'm going to start off here with just kind of doing a light sketch of what I see. Again, I have my horizontal format. This is a horizontal format. I can see from here to here, right? I can see that, well, that's probably from this point to this point. that distance between the back of the corner and the forehead. So I'll go ahead and just, again, gesture it. And I'm observing the portrait as much as I am my drawing. Because remember, when we're drawing through observation, you want to look as much as your subject as you do your drawing. So let me go ahead and raise that up just a bit. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and just try to draw it at this point. Sometimes you just need to focus on it. Okay, got that going. Again, I'm using my Vine charcoal. What's great about drawing like this is, again, a person will develop. Somebody will arrive, I guess. Down out to the lips. And again, you can do yours as loose as possible as you want, and or as accurate as you want, but okay. Okay, and I can maybe throw a little shadow in there at some point, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the neck area. Okay. And again, all this can be, it can all be removed at any moment, And it can all be changed, and so what's great about Vine charcoal again. Okay. Moving back over here to this side of the neck. And I'm just going to rough it out. Okay, there we go. I want to leave a lot of, things unfinished because I want to work with kind of more of the process. Okay. All right. So I've roughed out some of my, larger details. I can go back in here and now, again, get my kneaded eraser, just like kind of processes that we worked in the past. And let's do a little cleanup. Remember, you can bounce back and forth, adding. And again, be free with it. Coming back in here and doing just a little bit more definition and work. So you see how, I've simplified, with this gesture here. you know, a lot of the detail of the face, and I want to kind of treat this larger piece, you know, in the same way. And you can see how I'm moving back between erasers. Again, drawing more free in a sense where, you know, you really want to keep moving and keep building and keep editing as much as you can. So as we're getting into the later part of, you know, these processes, I really want you to try to spend more time with your drawings so we can experience these building processes. And you can see how mine's starting to clean up, and I'm really enjoying what's happening there. And again, it's just a rough out of an inch, but you can see it's beginning to take on its own personality, its own being here. Completely different from the sketch at this point. And at some point, your sketch here is going to be, you know, obsolete. You won't need it no more. And I'm almost to that point. I'm almost to a point now where I have as much information that I can take from this, and now it's evolving into its own piece of work, and the reference just becomes, again, a past thought or a past idea. And we can always go back to the reference at some point, but you can see how that's all I really need at this point, because I'm already feeling, and you will too, you'll know when that moment comes and you no longer need to use a reference, and then your imagination and your intuition will take over. So I'm still working a bit on this foreground here and adding some simple hair texture. You see I'm really just doing these kind of crescent shapes and giving this foreground figure here just a little bit of life, you know. And again, I'm really going pretty slow, but still I'm enjoying what's happening. Just a little kind of a breeze over, so you can see just kind of some of the line quality, and I'm making sure that I'm trying to get some interesting, you know, variations here, you know. And of course, again, you know, we're going to go in, I'm going to go in with some mixed media. I'm already thinking about if I were to add some washes of some color, maybe like in this area here, I could add a simple tone. And it could be anything. It could be a blue, a red, a yellow. It doesn't have to make sense. Here, you know, I got just simple kind of curls here that I can then go with my eraser and begin to, you know, add some more detail or tone, or not, you know, or maybe here I'm just keeping that charcoal and empty. I mean, I really want you to follow what inspires you. Because when you draw like this, it does become very inspiring and beautiful if you just allow the process to guide you. And remember, your drawing is going to look completely different than my drawing. So, you know, what you're seeing here is just my interpretation or what's happening here with me, and it's going to change with you. So, I'll continue on with the next additions of the two other figures. So here's my second figure here that I've decided to add next. So what I'm trying to do here is probably place the figure down here at the bottom. So I might crop this one in a bit more than what I actually have in this area right here. And then I think about placing this one smaller in the background. Remember, you know, they don't have to be completely, you can change them as much as you want, basically. So if I want this figure smaller, I can make that as small as I want or as big as I want, like I did the one in the foreground. So What I'm going to do next is just simply see if I can figure out, how I'm going to incorporate this in this area somehow. So let me go ahead, see what happens. I might just be redrawing this one, but we'll see. Meaning that it might be exactly the same size, but okay. Again, you know how I do that gesture drawing where I try to draw the interior first, kind of allow those construction lines, and then I move on to the outer edge. So, okay. Okay, there's torso. Okay. Profile. All right. Okay, I can work with that. Again, let the process kind of guide you. Okay, there. Rib cage. Don't see much information. That's about all I can add in there for right now. Okay, so I went ahead and added that second figure. So obviously this figure is going to be in the middle ground or behind this foreground figure that I did of the portrait. Let me go ahead and clean this up a little bit here. Got my gum eraser. So kind of working very similarly at this point as we did in our sketchbook. Of course, you might start off differently. Okay, you might again, I'm switching back and forth here, adding. Okay, like I said, you might start off differently. You might start off in the background first. But really, again, here's the trick is learning how to use your imagination and work through your drawing. Again, this is a more advanced level of drawing, but this is what this class is. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit more of the collarbone here. And then I'm going to leave that there, and again, wait for some detail later on. Okay, after a bit more work on the figure, I've just added just a bit more on top of the head and just kind of, work through it. Again, you are always wanting to step back and look at a certain point to really observe what's happening, and to make sure you're not just isolated in certain areas for too long, that you're constantly stepping back and viewing this picture or your drawing as a whole. So and so here we go. I can definitely see some perspective or some space happening in between. Some distance between the arm of the foreground and the background. So make sure things are making sense in those kind of elemental ways, right? Or unless it turns out that you're doing something a little more abstract or doing something a little bit more maybe animated. I guess it all just depends, So those two are inserted. I'm now going to insert the final figure here. So I'm going to try to place the figure standing in the far in the background. So I have this foreground, middle ground, background, and so far I'm liking what's happening. Before I start to add my third figure, I'm going to go ahead and do a line first just to kind of give me some background information. And since this figure here is cropped, since it's cropped down here at the bottom, I'm going to already want to kind of, because you know it's just going to be kind of the bottom half of the figure. I'm going to want to go ahead and create kind of a horizon line or a background line that's going to help me with that cropping of that figure. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of decide somewhere, and just with my charcoal, fine charcoal, I'm going to, here we go, okay, I'm going to go ahead and just create that line. So that already kind of gives me, you know, a sense of a background, and I can go inside that negative space in here and just do some washing later on once I finish kind of drafting this down. And that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm kind of drafting placement here with the forgivable material with the vine charcoal. And a lot of artists do this even before they apply oil paint on canvas. Is a good, you know, charcoal drawing before you get into your other mediums. So here I go. Same thing. I'm going to go ahead and try to get this form or this figure here, and I'm gonna switch to my charcoal pencil here because it's kind of a smaller figure. I'm going to even make this figure even smaller on this background here because I want it behind this, whatever this is, this structure or some sort that I have. So it's going to be a pretty small representation. Just deciding on splitting this negative space here, so putting him right in the center. Okay, and I'll go ahead and zoom in on that area so you can kind of see, get a better angle. Okay. Let's go ahead and continue on here. It's going to be a lot smaller actually. That's fine. Okay, almost there. See how again I kind of make sure I do a skeletal structure first, interior, and then I okay. Now I'm going to define some of those edges. And you know, I mean, I know that a lot of, for a lot of you, it's going to be a new experience kind of drawing like this. So really, remember, it's really about finding your own way of drawing in your own image. But try to use this process, okay? Try to use this process, you know, at least to map out your composition or map out your idea. But remember, you know, it's okay for at some point for the reference to just be obsolete, you know. Remember, it's just supposed to get you started. I'm still kind of using it a little bit more traditionally. Alright, so I kind of like what's happening there. Okay, I can go back in with my eraser and clean it up a little bit. So here I go with my eraser. Again, I think I'm done with my reference. That reference served its purpose. So I'm going to go ahead and place that reference in a way, and now go ahead and move in with the cleaning here. I kind of like the entanglement back there in this background figure here, so I might keep it that way. I might be done with it, or because I do like the movement back there. I'm gonna go ahead and switch back to my just define those edges a little bit more, you know. It just doesn't have to be much. Okay, yeah, I like that. Let me go in and do maybe some features inside the. Let's get a little bit of work inside there. Of course, I'm not too worried about it. All right. So I'm going to stick with that. Okay. I mean, I really enjoy the way that that background figure is just looking so far. Again, we'll go back in with some other material, again, clean it up, do some erasing. But then again, you can see how it is creating a decent background already. That, you know, definitely kind of gives us a sense of negative space here, or space in between these three figures in some situation happening. Obviously, they're all looking outward to this distance out here, so the viewer or you know, we can imagine a lot of scenarios on that, and they all seem to be looking upwards to something possibly in the sky. So you know, I really am enjoying how this is turning out so far. So here's a frontal view of my combination of the three figures in its gestural form, because this is just a vinyl first stage SketchUp. And you can see kind of what happened here, what I was thinking about with my composition. Again, is this foreground, middle ground, background, here playing you know, a horizon line or a structure, and I have this triangle here in the center. So and I was thinking that I could use that kind of triangle here in this negative space as a focal point with these three figures kind of playing simultaneously. There's an interesting energy happening in between. I kind of see this now that I was looking at it, and I want you to do the same thing. I want you just to pause at some point, or wait till the next day, or look at it, you know, at some other time, and just spend time imagining, you know, what could be happening here. And I see like these two individuals and this other kind of partner up here, all kind of looking up, maybe towards another building, maybe towards another window of some sort. But I see this as like this figure here is on the roof. So I'm going to put a door right here, right in the center, going upwards here in this triangle right here. And I think that's going to be interesting. So, you know, I'll do that right now. And then I'm going to be starting my mixed media now and going with the flow. Again, my first idea here is to put a door. I'm going to go with that. And I think I'm going to start off with some black washes, some gray washes here to kind of separate the figures. So we'll be doing that now. So I have my charcoal pencil, and I'm just going to add to that idea of the rooftop. So I'm going to put a line there. And when I add my washes, right, just do separation there, you know, so do this real fast. Okay, and kind of a doorway, I'll put it right here. Since I'm doing something geometric, I want some parallel lines, just like how you would see. So that should be parallel to that. And I'm going to go down. Okay, and down. Let's make it a little wider. Okay, so maybe it's all right. So I have a structure now that I can then kind of thinking about, you know, interior, exterior, and of course, again, it's within this triangle composition that I have in the center. And I think, you know, and it being, you know, creative drawing, I can always, you know, add some more details. So maybe, you know, I can do something like that and then start to create some decor, like maybe it's an older building of some sort. So, you know, just adding some detail just like how you would see somewhere maybe, and you know, and of course you'll be able to um, you know, decide on things like that um, as you go along. So I'll continue on, and here we go. So you can see how I've added a I figure since the figure would be standing, I'm lowering the door but leaving some like decor here, like, you know, possibly an old building would have, maybe an Art Deco building from the 20s. And then I'm also adding these kind of dashes here in the background too on that building structure to almost kind of seem like maybe a stone or some sort of just insinuating some construction surface. And I think what's going to happen is when I add my wash, it will that gray background Sumi ink, it will still show through. That graphite, that carbon graphite, should still show through. So, and you can see here how with simple kind of movement like that, I'm creating a you know, an environment already. Something's happening in a sense of narrative. I have some pattern, you know, have some drawing based design, and you can go on and on. I can sit here and add a facade of of line or like, you know, ironwork at the top overlapping the figure. So hopefully you can come up with some ideas as you're going along. So I was thinking up here, since I was looking at this almost urban scene here that's coming into the the scene here. I see this kind of ornate building, you know, kind of those old kind of architectural structure with some facade here, an arch door that I'm going to make black, I think, so I can have some good depth. But I think like an old street light up here or behind this building would be a telephone pole with all the structures. So I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of draft that out, you know, with my charcoal pencil again. You know, how would you know, if you go out to you know, Portland, how would a typical light pole would look somewhere, or you know, so I'm kind of getting an urban scene here that I'm enjoying quite a bit, you know. So we'll see what happens with maybe some information. That could be a street lamp as well. So we'll go ahead and give it kind of a lamp pole here of some sort. But again, you know, see how the ideas will begin to flow as you're going along. Let me get some better structure in here now. Now that I have some good gesturing, I'm ready for some straighter edge. So yeah, I'm kind of liking what's happening there in that background. So things are coming along so far. I think I do need some work in that area up here, but I'll get some erasing done and I'll go ahead and add some telephone pole wires there. Why not? Sometimes you just gotta take the risk. See what happens there. All right. Okay. So I'm going to grab a hold of my 1-inch watercolor brush, and I'm going to go ahead and start some washes in the background. So first, I'm just going to go ahead and wet my brush, right? And I might get some dripping. That's okay. You are going to want to make sure that when you are ready to do some washing to get the erasing marks off. So I'm going to brush that off a bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and start to soak kind of areas that I want. Again, I'm going to kind of work within some lines here, so I'm just soaking the wall or part of that back building structure, right? Not the face, not areas like that. So just kind of doing the same thing that we've done before with soaking paper, but more controlled because we're working with washes. But again, you know, you see how I'm not really being too worried about complete control. I'm just trying to get it inside more of the shapes of the building. And I'm separating kind of this interior rectangle for now because I want to create separate tones with those. So you'll notice that this, you know, what we're doing here, this process, it's going to take a lot more time than probably what you're used to, but that's the nature of more advanced processes of drawing. So do your best to you know, take the time. Remember, this is good drawing paper also, so that water needs to be coated twice. So the paper needs to be coated twice because it'll soak in that water. Right? So make sure you do it well enough. So after I have my paper soaked in areas that I have, one thing you can do is get a paper towel here and make sure that you are kind of, you know, soaking up some of the drips along the way. But of course, I don't really mind the drips and things like that. But if it's puddling up, I go ahead and just dab it a little bit with some paper towels in areas that it accumulates too much, and you can go ahead and continue on. I got my Sumi ink here, so I'm gonna go ahead, and it's dry Sumi ink, but you see how I can just wet it, and that's good to use it this way because you can really control how dark it is. So I'm going to start off light first, and I'm going to go ahead and just wash that area the same area that I soaked down. Hopefully that'll create some separation from that background structure and the middle ground or foreground, and for middle ground and foreground figures. So you see how I'm kind of just loosely, painterly like, brushing that ink in those areas. Kind of working with the profile as well as I'm doing the first figure. Don't forget to keep that surface wet. Moving over here to this side as well. Okay, and yeah, that pencil did, or the charcoal pencil did stay, so you can definitely see it through. So I'm gonna let that dry for a bit and then come back to it. You can see it's still very wet, but hopefully I'm getting some separation, and it seems to be working so far, and I'm liking it. I'm liking the results. So you see how I've went ahead and darkened the background and got the negative space. I need a little correction here, but I got all the negative space broken down. Now what I'm thinking about doing is adding some color, because I have some main subjects. I have my composition figured out. I've done a little bit more erasing and taking off some of the charcoal, because when I lay some maybe pen and ink on, I'm going to get my large pen after I add color, in order just to kind of emphasize some more detail. And you want that charcoal off. So I've cleaned it up as much as I want. I'm going to keep this gestural figure up here. I've done a lot of cleaning up here. And again, you're going to have a, you know, a different figure, a different composition. But I'm just showing you, if you want to follow this process of how I'm using my medium, then you can do that. But what I'm going to do now is treat my surface here that I want to add color on, this main subject, on this main character here. So I'm going to just kind of emphasize some color on maybe the forehead, the cheek, just areas that I have a lot of good paper, right, without a lot of gesture on there, so I can really emphasize the color. And again, you know, it's going to change, you know, but sometimes you just got to dive right in. So let's not worry too much about, you know, if you're watching the video and you're going, wow, this is a pretty involved process, and I don't, you know, again, it's all going to be different with everybody's mark and everybody's different figures that you're using. So, just have fun with it. It really doesn't matter at this moment what it looks like, because it's more about experiencing the uh, the, uh, the feeling of making art, and the experiencing the what happens. All those moments that something is discoverable, and you find new marks and new interesting little washes. So really just be at peace with what happens, and just work through it, and you will find something. So I've wetted the whole face down here. I haven't wet any of the eyes or over the charcoal, because that charcoal will resist, but I've soaked up areas that I want to start off with. Now I have this idea of maybe a night scene, or a dark evening scene, just because it just seems kind of has that feel to me, like a hot summer night or something. So I'm going to get a little blue over here. So what I have my watercolors here ready to go, and mix up some blues here. And I'm going to switch my brush as well. I'm going to switch up to the 1/2 inch brush. I started off with my 1 inch. I'm going into my 1/2 inch now, and I'm just going to get some ultramarine blue here. And it's a watercolor, so I want to wash it out as much as I can. I don't want to get too much watercolor. I just want to wash, so I can work with the process pretty slow. So I have some blue here, and you see I just kind of have an array of my colors just on my little tray here. You can do it on a nice porcelain maybe dish or something, but whatever you got. But it has to be something that's not porous, so you can really work that watercolor around. So I got some blue here, right? Let's go zoom up back into the piece. And remember to really have that paper soaked as much as you can. And let me go ahead and zoom back into the face here, so we can get a sense of how that wash is going to move. All right. And I always like to make sure that my surface is nice and soaked. So I'm going to make sure I go over it again. You can see how, when you do it, how you'll need to keep that paper wet. Okay. So I got a good fresh wash over there, and I'm going to just start here. And you're asking, well, flesh isn't blue. Well, it doesn't matter to me. I see. I had an idea, and I'm just going with it. Why not? Remember, this is art, and you create the rules here, and you create the world. Okay. So you see how that's a subtle kind of a tone that's happening on that face there. That it's working. I like it. Partly because I'm starting off pretty slow. I'm not going too dark. I'm making sure that I get a good wash, right? Meaning that I got a lot of good, a lot of water on there, so it's moving and it's not going to be too strong. But if it happens to be too strong, don't worry about it. Work with it. Okay, I'm not gonna do the neck just yet. Okay, so I have some color right there, right? And I want you to do the same thing. I really want you to just really start off with a certain color and just go for it, no matter what it is. And if you don't know what color, well, remember the color wheel. You have 3 primary colors: your red, your blue, your yellow. And you can use green. So just use those primary colors and just choose one and go with it and see what happens. So I have my blue on, and now I'm going to kind of do some color down here in the body area, and maybe some more detail color in the area of the cheekbone area underneath the eye. And I think the color, I'm going to wash it first like I need to. So I got my round brush now just because I want a little more control. And I was thinking of maybe a maroon color, like that, kind of a dark burgundy or maroon, or a light burgundy maroon, because it will be light with the wash, to kind of like maybe do kind of parts and pieces of color on the body. So I thought about the neck and possibly areas like this, under on the cheekbone area, possibly a little bit over here. Let's just see what happens. Okay, it might not work. It might, but then again, we never know. So down here, I'm going to get a little bit of red. Okay, so I'll do a zoom in here. So down in my watercolor area here, I'm going to get a little bit of red, and I got a little bit of brown here to see what happens. Not being too accurate with everything, just kind of getting the feel for it. Got some brown, got some red, mix it together, see what happens. Again, that's why it's probably good to have a larger plate or surface, but I'm happy with this size right now because I'm working with more washes. So I got a kind of a opaque looking orange, earthy, rooty kind of color. I think that might be interesting. So let's go back to the drawing here. Let me focus in on the neck area first. Again, like I always do, always make sure I got a good soak before I start, even though I've just added. Okay, and see, I'm really painterly about it, meaning that I'm brushing. I'm just working my way through. It's not necessarily painting that we are doing. We're just laying down kind of foundation washes, but everything's relative in the arts. Everything kind of has a sense of connection. Okay, all right, so that's interesting. I like that color. I'm going to keep some of that movement in there as well. Okay, just let that wash out. Okay, let's see if I can add some of that onto the eye area. Okay, I want a lot thinner up there so I'm not going to dip it inside the paint area or inside the brow area. And here I have kind of a drip that I'm kind of just getting some paper to soak that in there. A lot of times you can do all these watercolor processes here on the ground or flat. Add a little bit over there to the eye. Okay, on the nose area, I'm not going to add too much, just a little bit, maybe right down there. And again, I'm going to live with that right now because that's going to dry and that's going to change, but I do like what happened. Okay, let me move down to the neck area and the arm area. And I might do a different color there because why not? I can do that. Okay, so let me get out my brush here, wet down the area that I want. And what's great about working like this is the amount of textures that you can create with just the random washing and then that balanced with your control movements. So let it all work in harmony together. Let the wash do what it wants to do. If it drips, let it drip. If you don't like that, then start to control it as much as you can. I'm going to go down here a little with the same burgundy color, but I'm using my wide brush here. But it should be a little lighter. Okay. All right. And why not? I'm going to dab a little bit of blue. Let's just see what happens. I'm going to put a little blue in there as well. Okay, I don't know if you can see that, but I'm putting just a hair of blue. Just so I can begin to merge the face and the body. And why not? You can do all that. Throw a little bit of blue in there, dab a little bit, maybe a little bit of yellow, who knows? Remember, very rarely is something one color in our world. Anything that's alive, it's going to be a whole movement of different tones and colors. And skin is transparent, so there's all types of colors in those skin tones, which is why you see a lot of impressionist artists do what I'm doing here in a sense, or what happened in the impressionist era is kind of play with some of that sense of representing figures and skin and objects in multiple technicolor ways. See, I'm adding a little blue there. I don't know, it's just interesting. Again, that's going to wash and bleed out a little bit. Again, I can always add a little more water to weaken it if I want to, but I kind of like a little blue in there. So you see how I'm definitely, you know, starting to create some tones. Watercolor is nice because it's slow, and this character, this person that I'm creating in the foreground is definitely changing and becoming more alive the more that I use more mediums. Okay, add a little more blue there just to see if I can get some distance, slight distance in that arm. Okay. So I'm moving up here into the background of the drawing, and since I decided on this kind of evening sunset urban kind of scene, I'm going to go with a yellow to purple. I want you to see, I think purple would be a good one. Yellow to purple. Um, and again, I'm really just imagining in my mind what a sunset would look like on a particular day, on a particular night. And we can all do that. We can all imagine that color. You know, so, you know, depends on where your environment is or what you're drawing or trying to create. You know, some evenings are red, some evenings are purple, some evenings are, you know, gold. Just depends. So I'm going to treat my paper first. And you can see I'm not really being accurate with it. I'm falling within my gestures and still working within a gestural in a gestural motion, even with my watercolor here. And again, I think a lot of these techniques work. The looseness here works because you've considered composition first. You've built this drawing through parts and pieces of ideas and moments with your sketchbook, and then, you know, have you've thought about those ideas multiple times now at this stage of the process. So naturally, it's going to build into an image, and it will work even though we're not doing a lot of detail. It still works as an image because we've thought about the formula of composition, and that's why a lot of good art is carried not by the detail but by the overall composition and of course the overall process, and then in the end it creates a real truthful statement because you've built this composition and you've lived with this composition. Okay, so I've had my background soaked, and I'm going to start off with yellow, like a golden yellow. So I'm just going to mix a little bit of yellow from my palette here, and I'm going to start off in this corner as if that sun is setting from this direction. There we go. You know, just kind of working in between some of those layers, and you see how I've cleaned up my telephone and electric pole here a little bit, not too much, but it's definitely cleaned up a bit. And again, I'm going to wash that out using my round brush, by the way. Any brush would work. Your flat brush could work, but if you got the big 1-inch brush, that might be a bit much. Okay, get that golden sunshine on that side. I'm going to wash that out. And you see, now I can just make some marks. I mean, I can really just allow the brush strokes to play a role. Maybe not letting it wash out so much, but letting some of this happen here. Like, you know, there's some clouds. Now, a lot of times, you know, a lot of artists will start with the background first, you know, and get that wash. And you can do that too. I started with the foreground just because, you know, that's what instinctually I thought to do. But you know, you see a lot of traditional type of painters, and you know, they'll lay a wash of a background first, right, and then they'll continue and layer. So that can be done, but I like that. So as subtle as that is, I'm done with that. I can always add more yellow, because what's going to happen is the watercolor will dry, and then you have you can layer on top of that watercolor with more watercolor and then darken the tones. So here we are. I have a yellow tone in the background, and just taking a step back to take a look at it in full view, which remember, that's very crucial in these steps and these processes, is to take steps back, at least 10 steps back, you know, across the room, and really get a sense of the composition from a distance. All right, seems to be working pretty good. I'm still maintaining my triangle in the center, you know. This is becoming a good anchor bottom for that composition, this decor, so I'm taking all those things in consideration. Okay, now let's go back in and let me add a little bit of purple, because remember, I want that, I'm trying to get an illusion of a sunset. I'm going to come to the watercolor down here, and I'm going to add just make a quick purple, so I'm going to get a little bit of red and a little bit of blue here. Okay, let's see what happens. Let's see what kind of purple I make. Okay, a little more red. Might be kind of a more of a red purple. Keep adding a little more blue to that. Okay, it's going to be a dark purple. Okay, but remember, it'll lighten up. There we go. Now that is a good purple there. Okay, remember, it'll lighten up when we add it to that paper. Okay, have my purple mixed. Let's go back up and see what happens when we get some purple up in that background. I might want to do a little more washing, so let me get a clean brush here. Okay, add a little bit more. Luckily, that brush I just right here has a little blue in it, so that helped me out a little bit. And I'm going to start from this direction to get a little bit of that. Washing. Okay, and I'm going to change the lighting here just a bit. Maybe I can get some of those glares off, but you'll see it when it's a frontal view of all this. Okay. Again, just kind of making streaks here, just, you know, simple movements. Okay. Making sure I'm staying kind of within the edge of that figure so I don't. Okay, there we go. All right, I'm happy with that. That's plenty for me for right now. Let me see, a little bit. Sometimes you just can't resist. Okay, there we go. All right. So let's zoom out, and you can see how that purple will dry and bleed a little bit, do its thing, and we're starting to add a little bit more depth. There's some contrast between the face, and as you can see how I'm really just approaching it loosely, instinctually, and letting the ideas come out. Now, next step, I'm going to come into this figure, and I'm thinking about a gold, or like maybe a merger between the gold and this maroon here. So I'm kind of taking these colors here. I'm going, what if this guy is kind of a nice gold kind of color? Just because I think it'd be cool. You know, really no other reason. Because, you know, I'm choosing a color. I could make him green. I could make him any color. But I'm thinking I'm going to make this guy kind of a gold color or a dark brown color, something nice and rich. So let me go ahead and get some washing done. Cleaning my brushes, that's why I have two containers of water here. Let's go ahead and get this guy soaked all the way through. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did at the top. I'm going to layer some yellow, and then I'm going to brush over that layer some brown. So maybe I can get some good, like a good layering of a golden brown tone. Okay, all right, so let's start with some yellow, real simple. Okay, let's start from the interior, why not? Okay, looking pretty good. Not being shy with the yellow, I'm really adding quite a bit, because yellow does tend to soften quite a bit when it dries out in watercolor. So, okay, all right. See how I'm just really naturally just brushing. Okay, And I'll do a different angle. Here's a better angle, so maybe the water glare won't be so much on the paper there, but there, see a little bit more color. And again, I'm not being shy with that yellow. I'm adding it everywhere. Throw around more water. Okay. Shoulder area, I would like a little bit more right here. So just, what's great about watercolor, you just add a good gob of that paint, and then you just throw a little more water on there and move it. There's only a certain materials that really work well with that type of intuitive movement and thought, and transferring your thoughts into form. Watercolor works well because, of course, we're working with water. All right. So I'm happy with that now. Let that dry for a bit, and then kind of do a little bit of wash over that, and then we'll get to the next step. So I'm going to go back in next and do a little bit more color, since that yellow seems to be a little dry or drier. What's also, I'm doing a little bit more water just on top of that. You see how that watercolor won't move anymore. It'll move a little bit, but not as much as when you were washing. So I'm just going to re-soak some areas. And since I want kind of a more richer color on this figure here, in a sense of a color tone, I'm going to add now just a little bit of so down here I'm going to add some alizarin crimson, and I have that right here, which is kind of a nice pinkish rose red. Okay, then I'm going to throw a little bit of brown in there, so I have my brown. Okay, just to get that a little more natural. Alizarin crimson can be pretty drastic. Okay, I'm going to deaden it a little bit with some water too, so I don't get too strong, but I'm going to go ahead, okay, after I have my alizarin crimson, maybe a little brown mixed up, let's go ahead and now see what happens when I add it to some parts of the figure. So I'm just going to choose some areas, maybe since it's a darker tone, I have my light source this way, so I'm just going to add it to this side. And you see it'll layer on top of that gold, and that seems to be working pretty well. I like that. Yeah. You know, sometimes you make decisions and you're like, you don't know until you put it on. Okay, maybe some features, just some information. And as that dries, I can start to add a little more features. Here's some jawbone, maybe just some resemblance of an ear. Okay, and again, remember, we're not really worrying about detail. Okay, when it comes to the washing, our markers and a lot of those things that we can use next can add some detail and some more edge, in a sense of defining some shape. Okay, good. I'm liking that. Okay. Maybe a little stronger now, so you keep adding just a little stronger. Okay. And I'll do a different angle from the frontal view so you'll get a sense of how it looks without that glare. There's that different angle, so you do it. And I added a little purple just to some certain areas. And again, I'm not worried too much about detail. We're just trying to get a sense of the color tone of the body. great. Okay, I'm liking that. Down here, I added a little blue to my crimson just to get some darks, you know. Again, don't worry too much about it. Just a little blue, see that? It just helps out a little bit. Darker tones. Ready. Now I'm ready to add some different types of marks. I'm going to move into the marker. And I have my markers. I have two types of tips, but I'm going to go ahead and use my large wedge tip here. And I think I can use that for some of this pattern here that I started off with charcoal on the hair. And then again, you know, I'm not going with any particular hair color, but I do want to maintain kind of this bluish theme I have going with this figure. So I'm going to do a gesture of these same type of marks, crescent marks with my marker, and see, I can start popping out some intense color now. Now that we have our background washes, you know, I'm enjoying what's happening with the skin tones. Now let's start adding a little bit more definition and moving into the marker. So let's zoom in over here into the area that I'm going to be adding to, the hair. And I'm just going to start right here. You know, again, the marker, you hold on to it properly, and you really want to pay attention to utilizing your tips here as different widths and variations of line. Remember, it's all about variety of line now when we're dealing with the marker. And of course, it's going to overlap differently, right? So consider when you're overlapping, consider how that changes the tone, almost like watercolor, very similar. That's why it works well together, because the way that it overlaps each other on the banding, right, when you're kind of making these bands of these stripes of colors, you're overlapping the color and creating different gradients or different chromatic values. And so a lot of times the marker is considered kind of I guess an amateur kind of a medium, but really if it's used properly and you understand the qualities of it, that it's very much like watercolor in its way. It's just a lot more controlled. So I enjoy I like what's happening, and the sharpness of the lines here and the boldness of it also creates that foreground, that frontal view effect, because remember, when things diminish into a focal point in the background, things tend to get a little bit foggy, just like looking out to the ocean or looking out into the horizon line on the highway, right? But things closer to you are a lot more crisp, a lot more clear. So I think this is going to work pretty good. Okay, we're down here to the ear area. Let's change the direction of those. Again, trying to mimic some sort of, okay. All right, over here. Again, see how I'm kind of anchoring my pinky, almost using my wrist as a compass. When you draw for a long time, and I've been drawing ever since all my life. You'll figure out that a lot of drawing is about tricks that you know how to use, that you develop while drawing, right? And you'll learn that these tricks are best created when they're swift and they're intuitive. So a lot of times, like what I was just doing with these, crescent moves with my knuckle as a compass. I did that for a long time, just trying to make perfect circles when I was a kid. So again, it's just a trick that you develop after practicing. Okay, so I'm gonna make sure I go all the way up to the corner. Okay, not bad. Let me continue on over here. Right, and I like that. I think that looks pretty good. Let's zoom out. And that's definitely added a whole element of character to this person that I'm creating. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on with some more marker in the other parts of the figures to, again, provide more intensity and more detail. In the figure down here, I'm going to go with my brown marker here. And I'm going to use my tip instead of my wedge marker, and again just kind of add a little bit more maybe definition to that form. Again, you'll be working on these pieces for a few days, so allow the surfaces to dry. So I can tell when I'm making my marks here that my surface is still a little wet and a little damp, but I can still do some gesture marks. So here you can see I'm kind of using the marker, the tip, just to identify maybe some features of this figure here. You know, just subtle. Doesn't really matter how much you add. But again, you know, we're gesturing. It doesn't have to be detailed. But again, yours is going to be a lot different. Down here, I'm just adding just a little bit more sharpness to the rib cage, and you can see how it's, like I said, it's subtle, but that's okay. Again, just defining more edge and more line. Here's my background figure, and I'm going to go ahead. For him, I'm going to use the orange marker, bold line, because again, I want all this line to be exposed because I kind of like that. So he's facing the sun, so I'm going to kind of go into the middle here with a little bit of orange, right, and maybe do some yellow on that side. You know, again, kind of just making sure that this is a darker orange, the way it's looking, so making sure I have that on the proper side, and then I can maybe do some gold or some yellow on that side, arm over here, okay. And I'm letting some of that negative space happen. I'm not being too accurate with it, just because, you know, I like that gestural quality. Okay. All right, so that'll be good for there. Okay, now let me go ahead and get my brightest yellow marker, okay, and then just add a little bit of that yellow, maybe in some areas right there. Down the arm. No, let it mix. Don't worry about it. Okay. All right. Okay, yeah. So it looks like that, you know, gave him just subtle kind of some color value. I can go back in now. Let's go ahead and let's go a little drastic now. Let's see what happens when I add a little blue. Kind of not the large wedge, and let me just kind of define a back form here. Why not? Okay, and let's go ahead and give him some character now. You know, possibly, you know, maybe some bigger, bolder marks. Why not? Doesn't matter. Okay. So there he is. Up there. I did something pretty drastic up there, but I don't mind it. I like it. I can go back in there with some black later on, you know, and define some of that hair as much as I want to, but again, stepping back from a distance, you can see how that figure has been, you know, it has some character now. There's some color to it, okay? And again, I'm, you know, separating some of my parts of my figures. For the back pole here, I can just use a little bit of my brown again, maybe just subtle, you know, swipes. Don't need a lot of information back there, right? And then again, got that sunshine coming from that side, or that sunset, so let's add a little gold to that pole there. right? You can even add a little bit more golden, maybe sun rays in the background over there. So you know, again, marker is almost like just like a paintbrush. Just go ahead and add it. Okay, I like that. That's all I needed up there for now. And then I'm looking over here to the hair. What can I add to that hair a little bit? I'm gonna try some green. And it might be a little bit too bold, but I'm gonna see what happens when I really start to add, you know, something a little more drastic. You know, if I make a mistake, I can always stop. So we have some green inside there. Maybe not everywhere. Maybe just in some select areas, making sure I'm stopping to see what happens. Again, making sure I'm using the wedge of that marker end. Okay, nice. Okay, now let me switch to some brown. Still using my larger wedge. So there's 3 colors right now. Okay. Again, not everywhere, just making some select choices, some select places where I'm adding that little brown touch there. Darkens that kind of darkens that tone of the hair. Gives a little bit more depth, hopefully. Think of it as just adding a shadow. Yeah, so that's really filled in that hair nicely, I think. A little bit more full. Background. Figure, it's starting to stand out a little bit more. Now next, what we're going to do is we're going to add some black pen and ink there so we can really start to define maybe some little subtle areas. So black pen next. So next step is the Micron pens. And I have the largest pen, which I think is the 05 here, or the 08, so one of the largest pens. And I'm also going to make sure I have my Sharpie or my permanent marker, because now let's start working with some darks, you know, maybe some emphasizing some detail in the eyes, some eyebrow, maybe a little bit of cross hatching here and there. But again, you know, you're really just experimenting with all these materials, no matter what your drawing turns out to be. So really just take that as just experimentation, and you have to use all these materials or these mediums that we have in front of us. So just find a way to use them. No pressure at all in a sense of whether it's right or wrong. But obviously this is a black line. So let me go into the eye here and give you a sense of how I am going to approach adding some detail here. So I'm just going to simply kind of do some outlining here, and remember it's going to be subtle because it's, you know, it's a pen, so it's not going to be something that you're going to really see. I'm doing a little cross hatching here, just emphasizing maybe the bottom of that eye, other side as well. And remember, you have your figures to always go back and observe your references. So if you are having trouble, go back to your references, or like let's say you're trying to get a good detail on an eye, find a reference of an eye in, you know, anywhere. So just use references of all sorts. So I'm adding a little detail, to the eyebrow, you know, something like that, just to give me a little bit of a, see, I've done a little cross hatching, just give a little definition, you know. Again, do as much as what feels good to you. Okay, here as well, maybe some detail inside the iris of the eye. And just, you know, with subtle things like that, you can see how you can start to use the pen and ink, or the ink pen, to just add that little extra touch of detail. Might not seem much, but to the viewer, right, it does add just a little bit of control, just guides them a little bit more. Erasing a little bit of some charcoal here so I can have enough paper space to, or paper to achieve a mark. Okay. Get that eyelash maybe. There is an eyelid in there somewhere. And again, you know, I've done figures, you know, before. So I did a little brow line up there on the forehead. So just, you know, go through every little, you know, square inch of your drawing to see if there's any kind of line that you can add. Okay, down here in the nose area. Again, just adding some fine detail. Here's when the character really starts to kind of define itself, when this part of the process starts. As I zoom out, you can see, you know, real easily just line, right, how the figure starts to be more and more defined. Little chin work there. Moving down here, just, you know. Alright. So let's zoom out a little bit and you can see just what I've done there. I've added quite a bit of definition that I can continuously go back and maybe do some slight cross hatching, but that's all you really need. You know, a lot of ink pen work is for that. Just slight definition, slight touches here and there, and that sometimes is all you need. You don't really need to get into a lot of super detailed work. Remember, this is different. This is a creative drawing versus what somebody would do with a comic book or graphic design. So we can be a lot more freer, looser with the medium. So down in the more, you know, less detailed areas of the body. So let's say, you know, I want to add some contrast to some of these larger lines. I'm going to switch to my larger mark here, my Sharpie. And let's just see if I can just do a little bit of definition. I'm not going to use my wedge. I'm going to use the point of my wedge so I can then just get some simple, you know, just slight definition. Okay, it's going to add a little contrast to it. Okay, it's not so hazy. Maybe back here, just a slight. It doesn't have. You don't have to outline anything. You don't have to take that sense of outlining. Really control. Just consider it more just a larger brush mark. Really. Okay. I can move in, go back in a little bit, and just see I can add a little bit more darkness. Maybe a few more lashes. Again, it's just a bolder mark. Okay. Moving over here to the ear area, you know, if I want some darkness and maybe behind here, in a sense of shadow, do the same thing, but control it. Because a lot of times your tones should come from the color variations that you're using. So you see I just added a subtle kind of marks with my permanent marker in these areas that just help separate line and shape a little more boldly. But again, I'm more using it almost like a painter's brush where I'm allowing a free flowing of that mark rather than just a real controlled. Let it be free with it. Be free with that mark. So I'm going to go now to the back figure and add a little bit more definition with the permanent marker and the ink pen here. Now there's already a lot of information back there, so I don't need a lot. honestly. So I'm just, almost doing just gestural marks here at this moment. Getting the edge. Again, even though it's subtle, it's still there. It still adds a little bit of definition and variety of line. You can never have enough of that variety. Okay, now I'm going to switch to my large one, my permanent marker, and just really just use it subtly just for, okay, got a belt in there. Again, see how I'm just, almost like I'm laying just dabs of paint. That's how you have to treat some markers, because it's just really controlled paint. Make sure I get this up here. Add a little bit more definition to that. It's like a great expressive hair. And that should be about it. That's all I really need on that figure to give me enough information. Okay, so you see how swift that was, but effective. Especially because, that gives me enough definition to support that background character, person, or whoever that form would be. And then we can move on into creating some textures here with your straight edge and maybe your pen and ink again. So we're still in that pen and ink step. So I'm almost done here. And next step, I'm going to want to just add some more texture with my marker and my ink pen to this background. And remember, you're going to be making decisions based off of your idea. Showing you my approach here because, I think that there's a lot of ways we can learn off of each other when you really see an artist or somebody who does drawing or painting, whatever, when you really see them figure out things. And so I know that this has been a long demo, but remember to try your best to, watch it all the way through so you can really see that it is all about a process and a building experience, like anything that you would have to build or make, pretty much everywhere. See how I'm kind of adding some just interesting dashes, a little bit more straight now because, these figures here are very organic, right? They're organic live beings. So it'd be nice to contrast that with maybe some structure, some geometry. So again, just kind of creating almost like a brick pattern swiftly. I've already made a decision here that I'm not worried about too much detail. So it's not like at any moment I want to start trying to draw every brick, not necessary. Not necessary at all. So, just don't let the detail control the inspiration, and don't let the expectation of detail and accuracy alter the experience of making art, because remember, it's all about the experience that you're having personally with what your individual person, state of mind, environment provides for you. That's the important thing. Okay. See, I'm adding over here because this is very important. There's a little negative space on this side, which you probably can't see from that angle. Okay. So let me go ahead and zoom out. I made sure that I did this area right here. And then I'm just going to do the same thing with my pen again, and just kind of do some random ups and downs. Just in various places. Maybe just get a little brick or siding structure. Again, this is my night scene. Almost like summertime. Portland. So there's a lot of action going down on this particular day here. Okay, so you see I'm just adding small little dashes downward, and that should give me a good enough illusion of some sort of a built structure of some sort. And I'll do a little zoom in here so you can see that. You know, just a subtle kind of a siding, brick, whatever it would be, whatever typical building, various buildings that we have all around in any part of the world. Okay, now I'm going to switch up to my Sharpie again. Okay, and kind of do the same thing, but maybe just in swifter, bolder marks. But a lot less, of course, because I don't want to over dominate that line or dominate that background. Remember, that marker can be very, very strong. We want to really tread lightly on that. Okay, just various places again about. And you know, every time I segment away from a clip or a scene, I'm really stepping back and looking at it to figure out what my next move is. So you know, you're kind of seeing a little compression here on my thought process, because I am looking in between, and I am creating, I am making decisions. I'm gonna go ahead and outline this doorway now. And that will make that doorway a lot more permanent. And you can see how just a little work that I've done there has given me some sort of a directional geometry of a building of some sort. A little bit of texture on that wall. And again, that geometry separates from the organic form, contrasts from the organic form of the figures. I'm going to go ahead and strengthen that line. And strengthen this line boldly, so we now have a good solid ledge that this man up here with the native headdress is standing over. Alright, so my last step now is to finish off the doorway. I'm going to stick with my marker at this point, because I do want a specific geometry here and separation again. So I'm just going to make some stripes. I'm going to see what happens if I make some stripes here. Sometimes I'm imagining, like we all should be doing when you're doing your drawing, is imagine the environment or what this could be. And a lot of entryways to buildings have some sort of venting system or striped canopies. So, you know, just start to look at things in your environment to see if something could be used. Okay. I'm going to follow that arch. Again, you know, I'm going more accurate here because I'm working with geometry and, you know, architecture. So things like that should be treated a little bit more accurately. So there we go. Okay, so I have some information filled in here. I'm going to go back in here and just finish off maybe some detail here, some ornateness, and then that might be done. So I've changed up a little bit down here again. I'm on my last step here, just trying to figure out what I'm going to do with this here. So I've lowered my door again to make the figure here just a little more accurate with the height of maybe a one-story building of some sort. So I'm just going to first just go back to my charcoal. Oh no, go back to my permanent marker, my Sharpie, and kind of get the illusion of glass doors. So, you know, it's kind of an old comic book trick, but I think it'll work here. So if I can just do some bars here diagonal wise, I might be able to achieve like the glass reflection look, you know. So I'm just kind of using my straight edge, and you'll see here in a bit, right, if I have like one large bar with maybe a negative space in between them, right? And then a thinner line again. It's kind of simple because it's all about variety of line. And you can see if I just space out these bars equal asymmetrically, and you know, you get this kind of glass symbol pretty much, because that's really what it is. You know, glass doesn't really look that way, but we've all kind of known it in throughout the years of graphic design and comic art as glass. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that out real fast. Again, just regular Sharpie down here as well. I'm going to add another one. I'm also trying to create some separation between, you know, this figure here and that background. So doing something like that will help separate that figure. Okay, do one more bold line here. Okay. Yeah, you know, I don't mind that. Okay, I can always clean that up a little bit. Do another thin line here. You know, you're going to have the opportunity to be a lot more accurate because you have a lot more time. Okay. All right, down here. See, I can't forget that little detail here. Okay. That's an important little negative space there that I want to maintain. Make sure the viewer knows that I'm paying attention to that. Those little details really go a long way. Okay. Sometimes just freehand-handed. Okay. All right, now after that, I'm going to go ahead and just get my charcoal out, and I want to make this look like almost like it's like an awning billowing out, like an umbrella. So I'm going to add some charcoal here and just make a gradient. Real simple. Maybe a couple of lines. And that should do it. Okay, I can always go back in with a little more charcoal, darken up that top area, make it bend a little bit more. But again, not really caring about too much detail. Okay, pretty good. I seem to bend that form out a little bit more. Almost like kind of an umbrella awning. You know, we can even put a, you know, a little label there or a little street number. Again, just have fun with it. And gonna go ahead and, since I'm sticking with my in this stage here, I'm gonna go ahead and let's go ahead and get a belt on this guy, and you know, maybe having a more of aggressive texture on his pants here. And that'll also, just like I was talking about earlier, help separate that arm because of those two different tones. All right. There we go. Yeah. Let's take a look at that. And you can see how, you know, I've created kind of simple illusion of maybe some glass doors, metal doors, some reflective material. You can get as detailed as you want, right? The stripes are helping the direction of the gazes, of the implied stare. And we'll take a frontal view in a bit. So here is the finished drawing of my 3 figures that I then cropped and then combined into my larger horizon formatted sheet of drawing paper. So you can see that all mediums were used, and if there's any more mediums that you have, like maybe some gesso, I could definitely see some gesso white brush marks being added to highlight certain areas on the shoulder. But you know, drawings like this, you know, you're never done. or you're done when it feels good. But a lot of times, if it lives around you, art will constantly want your attention, and you will always want to do something to it. So a lot of artists say that once it's not finished until it's in the gallery, or until it's on display somewhere, and then it can go back to your studio, and then you can work on it again. I've added some things, small details. You can see I've added a street number, an address number. I put 2020 on there. Added a little bit of color here. Kind of thought that maybe there was like a stained glass on top of the awning, on top of this kind of a building here. So I really like the way that turned out. Again, I was working with this triangle connection between these three figures here, and there's some intensity happening here. They're definitely looking at an oncoming force of some sort. So that's why I kind of put 2020 on there, since it's been such a interesting year for a lot of free expression and a lot of very intense dialogue, to say the least. So I think mask would be interesting in a piece like this. I think I could add a collage of fabric to emphasize the mask of 2020, but I wanted to show you all how I would approach features and things like that. So I really do hope that all of you enjoyed this process on learning how to take ideas from your sketchbook and turn them into solid pieces of art and solid investigations of what your ideas can turn into when you begin to combine them, when you begin to dissect them, when you begin to just give it time. And for an assignment like this, that's going to be, I think, the real key here, is giving yourself the time to really work on a piece of art like this. This is an more advanced level course. So I think it's time for everybody to try to use your imagination. Try to build a drawing from your subconscious, all the way from the initial idea of sketchbook and recording intuition and recording subject matter around you, and then eventually taking those ideas and that subject matter and combining them into a larger composition where you have a true, honest piece of work that is completely built by you, and only you could create what you are going to create. And I think that's the key, is no matter what it turns out to be, if you spent the time, if you took the process seriously, it is a true creation that has never existed before. So I hope everybody has a good time. I hope everybody is at peace with your art making, and I look forward to seeing your drawings. Thank you very much.